Let me get to gallery. Liz, are you here? Don't see Liz yet. Alece, are you?
I'm here.
You are, great. Zoe?
Just arrived. Sorry I'm late.
Perfect. And Pouya, I see you. Cool. So, and there's Liz. Live.
Hi, sorry.
Live from a car driving somewhere. Back from a nice trip.
Yes. Yes. Here I am.
Well, I want to thank everyone for being with us today. Excited about this panel. It's cool jobs you may not know about in the entertainment industry. We're going to have some fun conversations, get to hear about people's journeys, what they're up to now, and go from there. So Liz, since you are also from the DC area, I thought you would appreciate the background. But also, we're going to start with you. If you could go ahead and kick us off with your origin story, that'd be perfect.
Sure. So I'm from DC, from Maryland, really, but from the DC area. I went to college in DC as well. I went to Howard University. When I was in high school, I had a lot of interest in the arts. I did a lot of painting and drawing, and I knew I wanted to do something in the arts at the time. And so when I went to college, I majored in film, and I did a minor in, and I kind of had or VFX or something like that. That was what I thought when I started school. And then as I learning through activities like this, I started learning about other jobs and other careers in entertainment that were interesting, and I noticed that I did enjoy the business stuff as I started getting through it. And so I ended up, as I was actually during college, I did some films, and I thought about going to grad school, and I decided to actually go to law school because there were a bunch of producers that I had met previously, at functions like this, who were all lawyers. And I was like, well, maybe, it's a good backup plan, and I'd have something in common with those producers when I do move out to LA, if I do move out to LA. And so I decided to go to law school. So I decided maybe my junior year to focus on that. And that's when I took the LSAT and applied to schools. I ended up applying only to schools in LA, to my parents' dismay, because they wanted me to stay in the DC area. And moved out to LA to go to school. And the other thing about school is they get, hopefully you could apply for some financial aid or something. So that helped me out on my move. And then from there, and this is going to be a theme for me, it's just like exploring opportunities as they arise. I never really wanted to be a lawyer, right? I didn't even really know much about entertainment law. And so for law school, anything legal related, I did public interest work. So I worked at nonprofits. And then for entertainment, I worked at the Screen Actors Guild, which is the that you guys, I don't know if you've heard about, but that's the actors. And so I worked there, and then out of law school, I worked at William Morris Agency, which is a talent agency, as an assistant, and I kind of moved up that way. I worked there, and then the next opportunity that came up for me was to work in film finance, which is an area that I didn't really know anything about, but the owner of that company expressed, he had a lot of interest in me and my growth. And so I've always kind of just targeted people who took an interest in me and wanted to see me succeed and wanted to invest some time in me. And so I was sure I'll check that field. And so I went into film finance, and I've been in film finance ever since-ish. After working at that company, and then I went to another company, I ended up moving over to Netflix, which was looking for somebody who had some film finance experience, as well as some other experience. And so I ended up getting the job at Netflix, and I've been at Netflix for 7 years. And my job has evolved. Another theme is flexibility, right? So my job has evolved over time. I started out doing one thing, and then over time I started picking up new responsibilities. But I practice law at Netflix, and I also manage a team there. So that's what I do now. And I live in LA, and that's it.
Perfect, nailed it.
Anything else? Yeah.
We'll come back and dive into the details of what the current job looks like and what kinds of deals you get involved in. Herb, I'm going to come to you next. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the beginning and the journey? Wait, you got to unmute. There you go.
Okay. So my name's Herb Scannell, and I am the current president CEO of Southern California Public Radio, and we are the #1 public radio station in Los Angeles. Public radio is, I don't know if you know much about public radio, but it's funded by donors and by members, and it's commercial free. There's underwriting, but it's not advertising like if you listen to Kiss FM or something like that. It's a very different kind of thing, and we're all news and information. So my background was, I actually started, I went to college in Boston. I went to Boston College. I joined the college radio station, and it was a music format, and I ended up, I love music, so I was there early on, you know, I was a DJ and did all sorts, and then I became the general manager of the radio station. And then I got out of college, and I only knew one person that worked in anything like what they call media now. I didn't know what media was. My parents were social workers, so I had no training for to be in business or anything like that. I went to college. I got a liberal arts degree, but I knew one guy who was working at a New York radio station. So I got a job working in the marketing department at New York radio station, and I did that for a year. And then this is the early days of cable TV. He went to work in cable TV, and a lot of people from radio went to work in cable TV. So I was in cable TV in the early 80s when it first started, when there were like 20 million subscribers. Now there are 100 million subscribers. So I was very early. And so I kind of grew up with the industry. And I ended up, I worked at Showtime in the 80s, and then as a marketer, and then I ended up going to Nickelodeon, and I was in charge of programming at Nickelodeon up until 1995, and I was president of Nickelodeon from 96 to 2006. And so I was in charge of making television shows. I ran the entire operation of Nickelodeon. So shows that you might know, you guys are much younger, but Rugrats, Dora the Explorer, Blue's Clues, those are all shows that I did when I was running Nickelodeon or in charge of programming. And I can tell you more about what it is to be in charge of programming. But so that was my job. I left in 2006, and I did an internet startup. So that's a whole nother thing, but I raised money, and I started a company called Next New Networks, and we're an early digital video company. So this is 2006. YouTube was 6 months old when we started, and we were making videos. In 2009 and 10, we were the number one and number 2 most viral videos on YouTube. And YouTube bought our company, and our company became the backbone for the YouTube studios that are in Playa Vista in Los Angeles, and they're all around the world. So that was my startup company that got sold to Google.
No big deal. No big deal.
Well, you know, it actually wasn't a big deal. I wish it were a big deal. But it was a nice, transition, right? And then I joined the BBC, and I ran the BBC is a British broadcasting company. I ran their operations in North America, and they have a cable channel called BBC America. They do TV productions like Dancing with the Stars, and many of the shows that you see on Netflix and Amazon or Hulu are some of the British shows are from the BBC in England, and we would sell or distribute them to other services. And I did that, and then I joined as a board member and advisor of a company called Me2, MITU, which is targeting young Latino audiences, and 83% of the audiences were under 34, and it was English first because a lot of the I grew up in a household. My mother's from Puerto Rico, and though I'm a lot older than all of you, we had a very much the food and the culture was my mother's culture. The language was English because my mother didn't make us speak Spanish, and my fault, not hers. But anyway, so I did that for a year, and I ended up moving to LA part-time. I'm from New York. I'm actually in New York right now, and then I jumped into this job at public radio because for 20 years on the side, kind of my side hustle was public radio. I was on the board of WNYC in New York. I was a chairman of a board, which meant that it's probably a longer explanation what it means to be a chairman of a board and what it means to be a trustee. But you're basically part of the directors that oversee the radio station. They asked me if I would consider running the station in Los Angeles, and I liked living in Los Angeles, so I did.
Perfect. That was a lot. That's a lot of ground covered. I definitely will come back to you, and we will talk about the nonprofit sector and a little bit of that. We don't spend a lot of the program focused on it, but it's an important part of giving back, and there are different ways to do that. I like, by the way, how you also said you went from DJ to general manager. I know a lot of DJs in the music festival business, and there's not a single one of them that I would ever promote to anything other than DJing. So before we move on, I do want to just ask how that happened, because it never happens.
Well, I was a horrible DJ, and it was college radio. So, basically there was not a high bar. If you knew records and you were a junior or senior, you got a slot. So I just, it's mostly my interest in music, but I never had an interest in being a DJ because I have a monotone voice and I was not that good.
Perfect. Zoe, let's come to you next.
Holy moly, how to keep it short. Born and raised in New Zealand, was a gymnast. And then when I got too tall, became a martial artist, which sort of led me in an indirect way to stunt work, which when I discovered that people got paid to fight and flip, I lost my mind and sort of made it my mission to get paid to fight and flip, which eventually worked. I doubled Xena for 4 years in New Zealand. That was sort of that was my first sort of proper responsibility stunt job. And then when Pacific Renaissance, which is the production company that did Xena and Hercules and all of that, sort of shut up shop, it happened to coincide with the Lord of the Rings movies shutting up shop, and the whole of New Zealand film industry sort of went into cardiac arrest. I packed up my bags and was on my way to Vancouver, thinking that Canada might have been an easier entry for a Kiwi, being Commonwealth. And I really just sort of thought that Hollywood was just sort of untouchable. Somewhere in the middle of all of that, I ended up at the audition for Kill Bill, and I landed the job, which was not my expectation. I really thought I was going to get stunt guys at home buying me beers for the rest of my life just because I auditioned for a Tarantino movie. Ended up getting the job. That kept me in LA. I had a massive injury right at the end of that, which was a whole other identity crisis that I could talk about for hours. Formed a working relationship and a personal relationship, obviously, with Quentin, who then sort of wrote an acting role for me. So I was sort of, I don't want to say I was forced, because that kind of implies that I wasn't up for it, but it definitely wasn't the direction that I was chasing, and acting scared I don't know what my language allowances are here, but it scared the...
You are welcome to swear as much as you like. It helps keep everybody awake. If it's part of your natural vocabulary, I'm not going to... ask you.
It is. Unless I had a grandma in the room, it comes very naturally to me. The minute there's a grandma, I tend to cease. But yeah, so that scared the shit out of me. But in the fact that it scared the shit out of me, kind of created a challenge to myself, and I started turning down stunt work to free myself up to take more acting work. Acting classes were quite possibly the most torturous, uncomfortable experience of my life to begin with. once I was acting, I realized that I wanted a little bit more control or a little bit more sort of creative say, and I would negotiate sort of creative producer roles for myself on the smaller indie movies that I could. Obviously, in the big budget ones, they're like, "That's cute, you're fired." No. So I started producing, and then just in the last sort of 2 years, I just had a moment where I was pitching an idea that I wanted to get produced in New Zealand to a producer friend of mine. And he asked me if I had considered directing it and if I would want to. And it was a profound moment for me because I recognized that I, in fact, had not even considered it. It wasn't that I'd considered it and decided I didn't want to. It was like, oh my God, directing. I had never, this whole movie is my baby and it's in my head and I'm passionate. And I did that thing I do where I feel really afraid and say yes anyway. And so now I'm kind of embarking on this trajectory of directing, and it sort of feels like all the different paths that I've explored and taken that may or may not have felt useful or beneficial at the time, or directionless, or whatever many of the little words that I could use to describe those times in Hollywood. But now I feel like they're all kind of being used and coming together, and it feels like I might be onto something good. But I'll get back to you in a year or so.
Perfect. I think that's often the case, at least for some of us. My path never was a direct one, and it wasn't until I landed someplace that the other decisions I'd made before made some sort of sense. Pouya, I want to come to you next.
Great. Hey guys. Hey everybody. So my trajectory is I was raised in New York in Silicon Valley. I went to college at the University of Virginia. Then I went to law school. Very similarly to Liz, I just went, and I seemed like a lot of Hollywood folks that I wanted to emulate had gone to law school, so I did. Moved to LA when I was 25, and when I got to LA, I basically told everyone I met, I want to work in Hollywood. I want to work in the industry, and so what people told me was, the best place to start is in the mailroom at one of the big agencies. And someone recommended that I read, actually a very nice guy named James Smith. He was actually the only active assistant who would meet with me and have lunch with me. And I went out to lunch with him. I'm forever grateful to him. He gave me great advice. He said, you should get a job in an agency. And there's a book called Mailroom by David Renson, and you should read that book. And that book will give you a lot of tips, and it'll give you a lot of info on how a lot of the people in the industry started. And to this day, I sometimes I'll meet with someone will ask to meet with me, and they want to get their first job in the industry. And I always say, I'll meet with you, but you have to read the book Mailroom first, because all the questions you'll ask will be 10 times better if you've actually read that book. So got a job in an agency. It took me 9 months of hustling around LA, running around to try to get that first job. And I finally got it at an agency. The first place I actually interviewed was a place called Endeavor, which is now William Morris Endeavor. At Endeavor, I thought, it's my first interview. I'm going to get this job, no problem. And the head of HR said to me, she looked at my resume and said, yeah, I see that you graduated law school, but you have not worked as an assistant anywhere. She's like, have you answered phones? Have you done any secretarial work? And I said, no. But how hard can it be? I mean, I went to law school. I passed the bar. Well, you should hire me. And she said something that I never forget. She said, look, the people who drop out of our program the fastest are like the Harvard law grads and the Ivy League law grads. And the people who are the stars are the kids who would go to like San Diego State and drop out after a year. She said, it doesn't matter what you think coming in here. What really matters is, can you man a desk? Can you answer phones? Can you gain the trust of the people that you work under? And that is really done by being good at that job of being an assistant. So she did not hire me. She said, I will hire you in 6 months if you can get yourself any job, work for free, temp, do whatever you got to do. And every 2 weeks, you need to email me and say, here's where I'm working. And if you email me every 2 weeks for 6 months and tell me where you're working, then I'll hire you in 6 months. And so I immediately tried to get temp jobs and anything I could for free. And I got a job I called Warner Brothers, and they had a temp office. I called Warner Brothers. They gave me my first temp gig. And when I started that temp gig, they moved me around the lot. And while I was there, I worked at Warner Brothers Television for a few weeks. And one of the assistants who I had to call to confirm a meeting, I told him, I said, hey, I'm looking for a job. Are you guys hiring? He said, you know what, send me a resume because we have a hiring bonus. So if you get hired, I get paid. So he passed my resume along. I got a job there working for the head of the film department. It took me 9 months from when I moved to LA to when I got that first real job. So, and I was willing, I thought for myself, I'm going to make it in Hollywood or die trying. If it had taken 5 years, I would have done it. I did not care. I wanted a job. I wanted to work in the industry. So I got a job at an agency. I did that for 2 years. I worked for a great guy, the head of the film department at this boutique agency, which is now part of ICM. And while I was there, again, I thought I'd always be in LA. I met a girl. She became my girlfriend. She got a job in New York. I moved with her, and I thought I have to start from scratch here. But I had enough experience after 2 years in an agency that I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I knew way more than I really did. And so I started my own company. I started trying to option books, and it started to be a management production company where I tried to find young writers, sign them, and then produce projects. So I did that for a few years. We got a couple of things off the ground, and then the financial crisis happened in 2008, 2007, 2008, 2009. So I needed to find something I could really hang my hat on. And the thing that I found was a lot of book agents had a lot of books that were available and that they loved, but no one was really handling. So I started trying to package books, and I built a little niche for myself, and I joined a team called New Leaf Literary in 2012. There was 4 of us at the start of that company, plus an assistant. So there's 5 of us, and now there's 20 of us. And we've produced, I've produced 7 movies and TV shows myself in the last 6 years. And then our team, we've had a few other things made. So we've had 9 projects made in the last 7 years. It's been a fun run. So I'm a manager producer. I manage and help authors get their film rights sold. The biggest project I've made is Divergent. That's the first movie that I produced. And more recently, we just had Love Victor come out, which was a spin-off of Love Simon, which is a movie that I made a couple of years ago. So yeah, that's my story.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. Alece, I want to introduce you briefly just so people know you're here and what you're up to. And then we'll come back and visit with you at the very end. Can you just explain a little bit about what you're doing today?
Sure. So I have another one of those unusual jobs. I'm a graphic recorder. So I'm going to be listening to the panelists and drawing. I'm going to listen, synthesize, and draw. So what I'm really doing is listening for those juicy nuggets, things that I think you're going to want to remember later. And I'm going to draw it out and write it out. And since we're all visual people, I would encourage you guys to do the same thing. Doodle as you listen. You'll remember what you heard a lot longer and a lot better. So.
Cool, perfect, thank you. And so at the end, we'll see what Alece has created and how she's documented the conversation. We worked on another show conference together, and it's really cool and just kind of summarizes everything in shorthand in a beautiful way. So I look forward to seeing where we go. So Herb, I want to come back to you and talk a little bit about, I think one of the clear threads throughout your career is you've gone from DJ to general manager and from general manager to CEO and found your way to leadership positions. I want to talk a little bit about what it's like to have that hat on as the CEO, and also what you look for when you were identifying young talent. Wait, you gotta unmute.
So a lot of what I never thought I would be a businessman. I didn't know that I'd work in media. I got to a degree lucky, and hopefully I got good. But the truth is, I watched a lot of TV as a kid, and so when I got out of school, I was lucky to go work in TV. And first I did radio, which I listened to a lot of radio, and then I worked in TV. And then a lot of what you do is you watch, you observe, you learn from others that are either your managers or people around you. And the best thing that you can have when you're in a company is a boss that kind of turns you on, that really inspires you. And I had a couple of bosses that were that way. So I have no financial training. I had no radio. I didn't take a communications course in college. I learned it all on the job. And now, I mean, when I ran Nickelodeon, it was a business that was, I ran Nickelodeon and a couple other cable networks. It was $2.5 billion in revenue. So, so the truth of the matter is, I learned a lot of it along the way, and I became, I developed TV shows, and then I got promoted, and then I was in charge of marketing and TV and development, and then I became a president of Nickelodeon, and so that was my path. So the best thing I could just say is that when you get into the workplace, it's not so important what the job title is. It's really who are the people that you work for, who inspires you, who's going to teach you things. And that's what you should really do, is to go to that kind of bright light, the person that really inspires you. And then the second part of the question was what?
Just as you were looking from a position of leadership, how you were identifying people to elevate along the way.
Yeah, well, I think it's always, you respond to people that have ideas, and that they have a point of view, and that they're, that they are, they stand out. I just interviewed somebody who runs the fundraising capacity at Southern California Public Radio, who I hired, and she was a former journalist, and now she worked at UCLA and USC raising money for the universities. And when I met her, she said, I think fundraising is all about telling stories. And I said, well, tell me a story. And so she told me a story about how she had raised some money for USC, and she had a point of view that I thought was interesting. So it's really about if and when you go to interview for things, it's always good to have a story, have a point of view about why you want to do something, because there are a lot of people who come in and say, I'll do anything, but it's the people that say, I want to do this and I'll do anything.
Yeah, for sure. And taking some time to prepare is usually a key part as you're thinking about that conversation.
Yep.
You don't have to come up with the answer on the fly if you know you're going to be in those conversations. I also heard, before we move on, you mentioned it, in terms of being in charge of programming. So from that perspective, what were you looking for? What does that role look like? What is the calculus you're using to make those decisions? And what were the things that really sparked for you?
Right. Well, I started, I became in charge of programming at Nickelodeon. And the thing about Nickelodeon is we had a clear point of view about what we wanted to do. And I've always been involved in companies that I usually have a mission and a point of view. But, the Nickelodeon thing was we wanted to open, provide a diversified slate of programming to kids. Before Nickelodeon, there was Saturday morning TV based off of toys, and there were Muppet derivatives based off of Sesame Street. And we opened up the world of TV to kids. We did scary shows for kids. We did sitcoms for kids. We did sketch comedies with kids. We did news shows. We did science fiction. We did everything. But the key behind all of what we did was what we wanted to do is we wanted to put kids first in all the programming. So I would tell people what I was looking for, and I'd say, I want to, adult TV, oftentimes has a figure like maybe Tim Allen, and they surround him with the important people in his life, and it's home improvement, And in kids TV at Nickelodeon, we wanted to put the kids in the middle and surround them with the important people in their lives. And the kids are part of it, and adults are part of it, but we were kid-centric in what we did. And we had very much a point of view that kids deserved as better, and kids deserved, the breadth of programming that adults had, kids should have. And then we went off and executed, and we hired people that kind of bought or agreed with us, and they created the stories. I was just the executive.
Perfect. Thank you, Liz. I wanna hear a little bit about the nitty gritty of what it means to be a lawyer at Netflix. You know, I think this is our highest population of lawyers on a panel. I'm mostly a lawyer myself, but I try to do everything I can not to practice law. So why don't you share a little bit about, you know, what kind of deals you work on and why they're interesting to you?
Sure. So, you know, Netflix is a subscription video on demand service. So what that means is we charge our members monthly, and then they get all the content that we can provide. And we don't own all of the content. Sometimes we license the content. And so we do deals. Some of the deals that we do are licenses where we kind of, it's almost like you're borrowing the content you're paying somebody to rent their content for a specific amount of time. And then we also produce our own content, and that content we own. And so for me, what I do, so I oversee the independent film legal team. It's a team of 30 lawyers, and we do films that have budgets that are, you know, like 40 million and under. So like the films that are the big budget films are in another group. And then our group, we handle our mid-tier and lower budget films. And those films include like, I think recently released Kissing Booth 2, Tall Girl, To All the Boys I Loved Before. Those are all my films. And those are probably ones that you guys have seen. So here's what happens at Netflix. When a producer comes in, they pitch their film, and we have creative, there are a lot of jobs at Netflix that you can have. So I'm going to tell you a few of them as I get to what I do. But they pitch their films, they come in, if my creative executive is interested, they send it to me, and then, or somebody on my team, and then we help structure it, which means we help figure out how are we going to do that license that I was talking about? Are we going to own it? Are we going to produce it? Are we going to finance it? So I help work on that. And then I do business affairs too. So the business affairs is we call the agents on the other side, or the reps, like Pouya was saying, and we negotiate the business terms of the deal. And then we also do kind of the more legal work, which is like drafting the contract and negotiating the contract details. There are tons of jobs at Netflix. So in that process, I'm interacting with all sorts of people. I'm interacting with our finance team. So these are people who went to school, studied accounting or business or whatever they did, and then they went to, maybe they worked at a bank or something, and then this is our corporate finance team, and we will deal with them. We deal with people who do production finance. So they've probably worked on set I worked as production accountants and things like that on actual sets. I work with our production team. These are people who are line producers out in the field, and we've hired them internally to help us figure out how to structure our deals. I work with people who are engineers, product people, to figure out the best. Let's say the project is like, there's a show called Black Mirror that we have that has a spin-off interactive version. So let's say it's something like that, then I would deal with our engineers to see what's the best way to structure an interactive show or film. So, I mean, it's really fun because every project has its own kind of interesting spin to it. And you're dealing with a lot of both difficult, but also great people on all sides. And so, you know, that's essentially what I do. My job has evolved over the years. The other thing I should add is that I work for a company. I work at a company that's growing. It's a tech company. And when I started, I was solely focused, even though I'm a lawyer, and I was solely focused on negotiating deals. Over time, I've picked up tons of responsibility. And so overseeing a team, I do a lot of management related things at the company. I meet with the CEO and the CFO and people like that. And being curious, I was really curious about every aspect of the business. And I've never really stuck to just my lane, as people say. I've always been, you know, looking at the broader business, no matter what company I've been in. And so I recommend that for sure. Hold on, that's my kid in the background, by the way. I'll mute as it.
We're happy to get the introduction if you want to swing the camera around.
He's busy in his Spider-Man comic book, so that's what he's streaming about.
Perfect. Well,
Star Wars.
The funny thing about Liz's experience is, for me, I worked, my first job after law school was Lionsgate, and I worked in legal delivery, which is part of what happens when a studio acquires a film in a licensing deal. They get all these other legal documents. I hated it. It was awful. I lasted 1 year, and I've gone a completely different path that led me into music festivals and stuff. And so even though, and Pouya, I think, will also can speak about the, his law school education and the impact it had, we had exposure to similar situations and came up with vastly different answers to the things that interested us. And I think the curiosity point is really important.
I do want to add, even like Pouya, I mean, I read mailroom when I got out of law school. I worked at an agency. The other thing about working at an agency or just assisting anywhere is that it's like grad school. You meet all of your peers, like all of my peers from my assistant when I was assisting at the William Morris agency merged with Endeavor, which is where he worked, or where he was talking about. But I worked there prior to the merger. But yeah, all those people are my peers now, and so it's actually a good experience in that way, because then all those people who now have jobs all over town. Yeah,
the assistant is the bottleneck. If you're working for a major executive or even a mid-level executive and you're the assistant, every single person who wants to get in touch with that person has to go through you. And so you're going to learn diplomacy, and you're going to learn how to communicate things that your boss says, like, I absolutely don't want to talk to that person, but you can't say that. You're going to have to get creative about what messages you use to make sure you maintain your relationships. Pouya, I want to come to you and talk a little bit about, bring up some of the things you mentioned. I would like to have you talk a little bit about what law school did for you and over the long run, but also you mentioned optioning books and packaging books, and I'd love for you to just expand what that means a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think in terms of in the studio system, almost everything is driven by IP these days. So intellectual property, books, articles, some previous sort of material, something behind. There's something behind almost every project that gets made these days. So for me to be on the front lines of books and articles and be working with authors day to day, I get a real opportunity to put projects together that studios and networks and streamers want. So it's a great place to be, and look, it's one of the things that people talk a lot about. It's not what you know in Hollywood; it's who you know. But I think one of the great equalizers is, and I think, look, in the book Mailroom, it actually has a great line where I think it's Patrick Whitesell. He says, the great equalizer in Hollywood is the moment you get into a mailroom at a big agency, you're on an even footing with all of those other people who work within that agency. So, there could be people in your mailroom that are like Steven Spielberg's kid, or somebody's grandkid, or whoever, someone who got that job in 2 days, whereas it took me 9 months to get that first agency job. But the moment I get into the mailroom, you sink or swim based on what you do, and everyone else does too. So it's an equalizer. Once you get in there, you really make your own breaks. So for me, I would say law school was the big benefit of it. Was instead of coming into the workforce at the age of 21, I was 25, And I did that 3 years of law school. It helped me kind of grow as a human and be ready for the challenge. And I mean, every day is a challenge in this industry. It's not for the faint of heart. You really have to love it. There's a great quote that I think Tom Rothman said this originally. He's the head of Sony. And then I heard Simon Kinberg say this at a panel once. And Simon Kinberg is one of the big showrunner creators in Hollywood. J.J. Abrams, he's at that level. Simon Kinberg said, close your eyes and imagine any job you could be happy doing. And if you think of anything other than working in Hollywood, then you don't belong in Hollywood. It really has to be the only thing for you, or you're wasting your time. So that's, to me, is one of the things where I went into the job of working in a mailroom, and I thought, I'm happier here than I'll be doing anything else for any amount of money. So that's why I think, even with my law degree, I didn't care that all my friends in law school were making a lot more. My friends in law school were making, I think, 8 times as much as I was the first year out of school. And I didn't care. I was way happier than they were.
And so can you talk us through the packaging process a little bit for how that goes, what that part of your job looks like?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think for us, it's starting with a piece of material, an article or a book, something that, we're really passionate about and excited about. And then putting the elements and the pieces together so that way we can go and hopefully get a 7-figure offer from Liz. And
where are you finding these things? How are you finding them? And then what are you putting? You said packaging. What are the things that you are packaging together before you go to Liz?
Okay, so basically, in terms of the things that we're finding, I'm having authors when they write a piece of material, they type the end, then they call me and say, I've finished this project. My book agent is going to try to sell this to a publisher, and I would like to sell it as a movie or a TV show or whatever it may be, right? So that's where it starts for me. It starts when the author hits the end. I'm reading it. I'm looking at it. I'm trying to figure out what it is. A good example is Love, Simon. Love, Simon was a book called Simon vs. Homo Sapiens Agenda. I read it. I thought this would make a great movie. The book, it wasn't a bestseller, but it had started building a little fan base. And so we started figuring out what are the pieces, like who's a good producing partner for us. So went to try to figure that part of it out. And then from there, it becomes, who's the right screenwriter, who's the right director, who's the right talent you can add to it. And so for that project in particular, we had production company, we had Aptheker and Berger, who were young screenwriters at the time. Now they're like prodigy killers. They're doing amazing. They're the showrunners of This Is Us. They're the showrunners of Love, Victor. They're brilliant. But back then they hadn't written that many feature scripts. So this was 4 years ago or so. It was really at that point, it was figure out, okay, what are the elements of the package that we need so we can go and sell this to a studio. And then we ended up pitching it only one time to Fox 2000, and Fox 2000 bought it. So the packaging process was book to producing partner to then let's go get it's the right studio, the right home. Who's actually going to make the project?
And so part of your job is understanding all of the different types of projects, different people and places are making, so you know where to take that.
Exactly. It's a very, very nuanced understanding of, and I go by 2 rules. Rule number 1 is work with good human beings. Rule number 2 is make projects that you're proud of. So it's a really simple formula for me, and that's what I follow.
Working with good human beings is definitely the ideal scenario, but not always the constant one. Zoe, I want to come back to you and just get a little bit of an insight. We'll talk about kind of the present stuff, but in the stunt woman context, it's a fascinating part of the business. And tell us what a day in the life is like there, and how you work with directors and talent, and how's it work?
Oh, that's like a large question. How does it work? Well, a day in the life of, I guess for me, the most consistent time in my career as a stunt person was Xena, because I was doubling Xena. I was working 4 to 6 days a week. It was every week unless we were on hiatus. Like the rest of my career has been quite freelance, piecemeal. So a regular day in the life of is kind of a much harder, it's just a harder task. But so when I was working on Xena, doubling the lead, I would usually get called to set around 5:36, and I would go through hair and makeup and wardrobe and all of that fun stuff that everyone always likes to be like, oh my God, it must be so nice to just sit in a chair and be pampered. I'm like, wrong. I would much rather be in bed, not having cold body wash painted all over me. And, it becomes the job. It's no longer pampering at that point. Plus, I was very much a tomboy who didn't wear makeup if given the option at that point. But so you're in hair and makeup and wardrobe for the first hour or hour and a half, depending on whether there's prosthetics and all that kind of carry on. On Xena, I was working usually a 12-hour day. We didn't do a lot of overtime, but also I very seldom had short days. So usually, especially if you're doubling the lead, I would be kept around just in case if something else popped up. If you're doubling sort of a satellite character, when the character's wrapped, you're kind of wrapped. You get to go home even if you've only been at work for 2 hours. One of my favorite things when I first started was that they provide a full breakfast and a full lunch and lots of yummy snacks in between, which was kind of new to me and not underappreciated. For TV.
So Rachel's talked a lot about how important craft services are for taking care of your crew and your cast, and like you just nobody set that up. Zoe just threw it out there, like how nice it is to feel fed and how it sets you up for success.
My first 2 introductions when I walk onto a new set as a stunt person is the catering and crafty. So 2, catering, crafty, and the medic. Different as a director and an actor, but as a stunt girl, those are the 3 that I'm like, I'm gonna need you guys at some point in my day, and I want to have a good shorthand, but it would be usually, in TV the turnaround's really fast. So in terms of rehearsals and time spent that way, usually that would only be if we had a massive sequence, or if there was a gag that we hadn't done before and we were kind of making it up, so we wanted to figure it out before we actually got on set. But a lot of it is I would spend my time in between shooting stuff learning the fights that we were going to be shooting on main unit. So it was a lot of, I didn't do a lot of sitting around. There is a lot of sitting around, but I, as the role of Xena, I was not sitting around a lot. What else? So then for me, it was watching a lot of what they'd done on main unit if I wasn't already on there, kind of putting it in my body, figuring out where it fits in the story, performing it, and hoping if we had to go again, it wasn't because I fucked it up and it was on someone else. And then the same, at the end of the day, you wrap, get de-wigged and take your clothes off and wash as much makeup off as you can before you go home to your own white sheets that don't stay white very long. That's kind of, that was sort of my typical day. It's kind of an interesting thing for me is when I'm on set in whatever capacity, even if I am in downtime and I'm not being utilized in front of the cameras, it's really hard for me to achieve anything else on set. Like I tried reading books, I try studying things, I try watching things. It's like I can't fully engage in whatever that other thing is because I'm constantly a little bit just waiting for my name to be called. So it's kind of a myth that I feel the need to bust occasionally. People are like, oh my God, I've got so much time on your hands. You should be able to get this done and this done and this done. I'm like, it's kind of like being in COVID lockdown. For some reason, you just can't quite get the stuff done that you should be able to in the hours you've got,
So did you just get beat up a lot? Is that part of the job?
No, I did a lot of beating up. Have you not watched the show? Come on. She beats up all the people. I was beating up a lot of people.
I know
went to my parents one time.
But Every once in a while, you got to take a punch too, right?
Oh no, I did. Zoe got trashed. Xena occasionally got trashed, but you know, even in beating other people up, you take your bumps, you know, for sure.
And what was your relationship with Lucy Lawless, Xena? For those of you who are not familiar, you know, did you spend time kind of learning mannerisms or anything like that? Does it matter?
She's a rarity. She's just a stellar human. She's hyper intelligent. She's really kind of emotionally aware and considerate, very humble and down to earth. Like a lot of things combined that aren't always the case with a lot of people that we work with in this business. But she and I spent a lot of time together, but she was mainly on main unit, and I was sort of second units, the action units Xena. So when we would be doing a fight on main unit, I would be there with her, unless I had something to do on second unit. But she made that relationship really pleasant, really easy, and it benefited both of us to have that. You know, it just does. If you're coming, it's like any collaboration. If you're all part of the same team, if you're all collaborating, it just feeds the outcome that much more positively. I recognized that I did a lot of mimicking, because one time I was watching a playback of something that I was doing, and I had this weird stance where I had one leg bent, like my leg was cocked, like I was about to start running, even though I wasn't. And it looked kind of odd. And I was like, what is that about? That's so strange. And the director, Paul, was like, oh yeah, watch this. And he pulled up Lucy's action of the same stuff that we were covering from main unit. And she had this stance on that she had been doing for a little while, and I hadn't consciously recognized it. But when it is your job to watch and absorb and mimic and then replay, I think those things did start to, I'm a much more conscious performer now than I ever was back then. Back then I relied solely on the training I had as a gymnast and instinct. And fortunately my instincts were kind of right for what I was getting into, but now it comes from an educated experience place, which is quite different.
and as you're, you know, starting to walk down the director's path, and also having been directed by Mr. Tarantino,
Either way, yeah.
what was that experience like?
Working with Quentin?
Yeah.
Boring. So dull. No, I'm kidding. Obviously, totally kidding. It's the opposite of boring and dull. It was, you know, it changed the direction of my life, really, and my career. And it also changed sort of my perspective and my vantage point on what it is to tell stories and what it means in terms of what role I'm playing in telling the story. Because at the end of the day, in whatever facet that you're participating, we're all here to get this story in a position where it can be appreciated and absorbed by other people. So we're all
goes to Liz and Herb in his former positions.
Well, but even then, like without those guys, this thing doesn't get to where people can see it. And if it's something I've made and no one can see it or experience it or be moved or touched by it, then I still get something out of it, but it's all part of the reaching people at the end of the day. So like none of us can do what we do without the rest of us, you know. But Quentin has the very distinct kind of view that anything in front of the lens, he appreciates everyone behind the lens as well, but anything that's in front of the lens is literally a part of the story. So props and set design, and they all play a role that's as important as the actors and as the script and as the, you know, well, maybe script, you might hold that in a little bit more. Joking. But so for me, when I walked in as a stunt girl and I would make all the jokes like, oh, what's your motivation? Oh, to not die. And then, you know, like those were the kind of jokes I was making, that when he did finally kind of stop me and say, I want to know what your motivation is in this shot that we're doing. And I was like, uh-oh, that doesn't sound like a joke. That sounds like a very serious question. And I'm not sure if I know the answer to it. And I made some off the cuff joke, which he kind of could appreciate, but he was like, no, he basically pushed me to the place of, if you are in the bride's costume and you are standing in front of the camera and it's rolling on my set, you are the bride. I don't care if you're Zoe or if you're Uma or the body double or the horse riding double, not the horses in Kill Bill, but you know what I'm talking about, that you are the bride. And it became kind of like, it switched something quite clearly for me, that I'd always I think I'd always approached it like that, but I had never been conscious of it. And the minute I was conscious of it, then it becomes a responsibility. Like, of course I am. Of course I'm the bride. Like, what else would I? I'm not just here to be the badass side of Uma. Uma's here to be that part of that character, and I'm here to fill in the gaps with this part. But it doesn't matter, you know, whenever the camera's on the bride, it's the bride in the movie, you know. And it became, I don't know, it just sort of shifted the way I felt about anyone in front of the lens, any department that has any piece of their work in front of the lens. Out of respect for that department, it has to be important. Otherwise, what are we doing, you know? Anyway, I don't even know if that answered your question, to be honest.
Yeah, no, that was good. Herb, I want to come back to you, and I want to talk about a little bit of the difference in the nonprofit space. You know, Film2Future, where we understand how that works on a small level, but what does it mean? You know, how is it different to run a nonprofit organization, and how, you know, a for-profit company, you know, hey, are we making money? Are we growing? Those are usually the considerations. Are we doing good things? Like maybe you get the third one in there, but the first two are, if you're making money and growing, that's a positive. Often in the nonprofit space, it's a very
then hopefully they give me some money. But the difference is that when you're not for profit, you raise money, you know, through philanthropists, people that have money that they give to good causes. When you're in a commercial business, you're driven by profit, and the more profit you make, the more that you can kind of propel your business forward. And not for profit, you just got to keep on. If you have initiative and an ambition, you've got to go and get the money, and that's part of the big difference. But you know, you're driven by, you're doing the job because you love the product and you love what you're doing for your community, and that's why you do it. Whereas when you're in a commercial venture, I mean, I was lucky when I was Nickelodeon, the BBC too. I was very proud of of both those companies, because they were both on a mission, and they had like some commercial ambitions, right? In the case of Nickelodeon, very much so. In the case of BBC, more of a balancing act. But when you're in a not-for-profit, it's all about your mission, and you've got to figure out how to finance it, and you finance it usually through other people's money, and it's usually because people believe in your cause.
And in your day-to-day right now, is fundraising a part of your role personally, or is that more on the staff side?
Yeah, no, it's part of my role personally. I mean, if there's we were in the COVID crisis. We were in danger of losing 50 of 150 employees, so I had to go off and raise money, and I put out a campaign, and I called donors, and we saved 40 plus jobs. So I'm on the front line of fundraising. I oversee all the departments, and I help set the strategic vision. You know, we just got into podcasting. We set up a studio called Alece Studios. We launched 4 podcasts this summer. That's a new kind of business for us. And we did a marketing campaign. The company had been marketed in 8 years, so I raised money for that. And we had a campaign all over the billboards in Los Angeles in the wintertime. So yes, I'm active. My day-to-day job involves fundraising with the head of the who has a job called development, and they raise money.
And maybe could you give us a quick anecdote of a recent fundraising success? Like what for you is a feel good, I made something happen today fundraising result?
Yeah, we had we were really up against it, and we kind of pulled a rabbit out of the hat. And we needed, we were going to be $10 million down, which is about a third of the budget of a public radio station, low 30s. So we had 3 weeks to raise money, and so we sent out a letter, basically saying, that we were going to lose people in the newsroom, and we sent it to people that had given us a little bit of money, and a woman sent us $1.8 million in stock. And she was, which was fabulous. And that we were on our way we raised about $8 million of the $10 million that we need to raise. but that was, you know, serendipitous and like an angel.
It's, you know, one of the themes we've touched on a lot over the course of the last couple of weeks is, you know, don't be afraid to ask for the thing you want. And, you know, we've talked about it a lot in context of professional opportunities and creative opportunities. And in the fundraising and nonprofit space, you know, the same logic applies. And we certainly had the beneficiary of people, you know, I love asking people for money. I think it's really fun. Once you start flexing the muscle to try to achieve something, it gets easier. And you never know what might happen. And there are people with foundations or companies who may have their own agenda and may say, oh, we were just looking for something just like you to help. And all of a sudden, you know, you end up with a stock grant in $1 million, $2 million. And, you know, the mission of the organization is able to continue with those kinds of gifts. So I'm going to open it up for questions now. If anybody has one, feel free to raise your hands or type it in the chat. And let's move into this section if anybody's got something. And in the meantime, Liz, I want to come back to you and talk a little bit about what's the Black House Foundation while we're talking about nonprofits?
Oh yeah, so I'm on the board of a nonprofit organization that that's mission is to promote diversity in the film and in the film industry. And what we do is we partner up with film festivals, mostly the mainstream film festivals, because there are film festivals that are specific to certain communities, like the Pan-African Film Festival. We are more mainstream film festivals to support both the filmmakers who get into the festivals, to make the festival programmers aware of some of the filmmakers in the community, to provide educational programming to the people who attend the festivals. A lot of the filmmakers that, especially young filmmakers that maybe don't have access to distribution companies or foreign sales companies, which, I mean, we could probably have another conversation about that. I used to work at a foreign sales company where they represent films. It's almost like an agent for a film itself. They take it to a film festival or market, and then they sell it to distributors. And you have to have those relationships. Anyway, we would set up arrangements so that people can meet those people, the people who would get their films distributed at the festival. So we too have to raise money and do that as often as possible. We're primarily at Sundance in Toronto, and we've gone to Cannes and LA Film Fest, and you know, we try to just go where we have an impact, but we've seen some major moves on the Sundance part. And Sundance has really partnered up with us, and their programmers work with us. We actually program some of their programming for them at the festival as well. So
cool. And I want to give Alece a heads up that I'm going to come to you shortly. I'm going to do one more quick round of everybody just kind of taking a moment to offer, if they have advice that they'd like to give, like a short little nugget before we close out. And then before we're done, we're going to come back to Alece, and she's going to share her screen and show us how she's captured the conversation. So Pouya, you wanna drop a nugget of wisdom that you wish you knew when you were a teenager?
Yeah, you know, the thing read classics. I think there's something really special about talking to executives in Hollywood and filmmakers, that they can refer to like really, really classic things and say, oh, this is similar to this. My wife actually did it the other day. My wife's really, really well read and went to a great school in La Jolla growing up. And she was like, yeah, we were watching Walking Dead, and she's like, Walking Dead is basically like Canterbury Tales with zombies. And I thought that was such a great reference. And I feel like, you know, if you read all of the classics when you're young, when you have time, because now, you know, for those of us who have jobs in the industry, reading is a part of our everyday life. I mean, you're reading, no matter what job you have in the industry, you're reading scripts, books, or you're watching reels or whatever it is. So we don't have as much time to read classics, although it's, you know, it's good to always catch up on them. But that's the one thing I would highly, highly recommend is, you know, Steinbeck, Dostoevsky, all of those great classic books. Read them now when you have a chance.
Thank you. So Zoe, I think you have a video for us, and you can, I don't know if you want to share the link in the chat or if you actually want to screen share. How long's the video? Wait, I need you unmuted.
Not often I actually hear someone say that. It's usually the other way around. Zoe, shush. It's 5 minutes, so I can post the link here if you wish.
Yeah, I think that's probably best if you want to put it in the chat, and then I'll come back to you for your nugget while you're doing that. I'm going to kick it over to Liz.
All right, a nugget. I would say that even, you know, at every stage of your life, you should think about your resume, which is like what, you know, you carry on with you throughout life, and think about what, using the relationships you have from Film2Future or wherever, from for internships. You don't have to get paid to gain an experience that you put on your resume. You can try to work while you have internships and things like that. And I think that has helped me figure out, not only does it help you in the future when you're looking for a job, but it also helps you figure out what exactly you want to do. I worked when I was in college, I worked in the music industry early on for Bad Boy Entertainment, and like that was an interesting experience, but it led me to understand that I didn't want to work in music. I wanted to do something else, so I would say just think about that as you move along.
Perfect. I think I lost Zoe for a second, so we'll close. Oh, wait, no, she's back. See that stunt woman skills, gymnast, just like across the room super fast.
We just get these every afternoon. The weather comes out of nowhere. I mean, it's like blue skies here. And then the wind my curtains just got sucked against the windows and my plants are falling over. And so I just had to close some windows. Sorry.
Do you want to tell us about the video, or do you want to leave us with a little nugget? Your choice.
I love the word nugget by choice. That's a very cute name. The video, I should just give it a little explanation because if it's there. It's called the Boss Bitch Fight Challenge. It was inspired by videos that I had been sent that were similar, that had a distinct lack of boob in them, and I was like, you know what, I might make one that's all boob. And so we made an all women version, and it kind of blew up online. It's got some pretty incredible people in it, but it's just, I don't know what it is, but then I'm trying to mine what's so good about it, because I'm now translating it into a feature film, which is dope. But it's just like all these women were so excited to get on board and probably do something other than sitting. Oh, are you playing it?
I was in the background. I was trying to hit pause, so I don't know what's happening, but I'm going to look forward to seeing.
Interrupting me. Yeah, but so it's a I don't know. People react to it. I've had a lot of women around the world kind of be like, I don't know why, Zoe, but I got really emotional watching. I was like, trust me, I cried. Don't worry about it. So it's just I think it'll be really fun, and it's been yeah, it was a really exciting process for me. Lots of hard work, but it felt kind of organic and it inspired itself, which is sort of moving forward. If I can, like working with good humans, if I can have the kind of work that inspires itself and other people to get inspired, then I would, this could be my little nugget.
Perfect. Thank you. And you made the whole thing during COVID, right?
Yeah, we made it in a week, like less than a week. It was kind of like just turned around on itself. It was a lot of late nights in the editing. Jacob, my partner, was helping with the editing, and that was it's quite satisfying actually. But yeah, it was in under a week. We released it like 2 hours before we'd started it, kind of thing.
A lot can happen in a week. Herb, coming to you.
So you know, I guess the thing I would say is just that you know, I didn't know anybody in the entertainment business. I knew one guy, and happened to be a good guy to know. But it was, you know, I didn't have any connections in Hollywood or anything like that. And the best advice I have is, don't get hung up on when you're breaking into companies about jobs, kind of like what Pouya said about working in the mailroom. If you want to work in entertainment, take a job and then find the people that are going to, basically light it up for you. Who's going to inspire you, and then get closer to that kind of that light, because that's what will make you better at what, you'll learn a lot that way. And you're going to learn a lot in school. You're going to learn a lot through classes, but you're going to learn a lot more on the job. And it's not always who you know, but once you're in a position, just take advantage of it and keep on trying to get to the next person.
Thank you. Alece, are you ready? If all goes well, she's going to be able to screen share. Drum roll, technology. Are we going to work today?
I could do like a 30-second nugget while we're waiting.
Go for it.
My nugget is kind of the antithesis of what most nuggets should be. So feel free to just ignore it if it doesn't fit for you. But one of the things I recognized was, where should I start?
I don't know, Alece, or should we keep going and then?
Yeah, keep going. You can just look at this while you're talking.
Oh, that's the thing that you've been doing. What?
Yeah.
That's not fair. Mine would not look like that at all if I did. All I was going to say is that one thing that I've recognized is I think it's a really powerful I think it's really powerful to have goals and intentions and be striving for them. But I think it's really powerful to stop regularly and just calibrate whether you're still on the path that's feeding you best. Because I see a lot of people, especially in our industry, that get like fixated on, I want to be an actor and I want to be famous and I want to be this, or I want to be a director, I want to be, and I just see them sort of tearing apart their own lives for this goal that if they stopped and thought about it, it might not be the thing that they want anymore. Or that there might be some other experience that comes in that they ignore because it doesn't fit where they want to go, but they haven't checked in again to make sure that those goals are still fresh and feeding them in an exciting, inspiring way. And I found myself stuck in a couple of eddies of those kinds. And I just think that's an important thing to keep in mind, because people get like, it's failure. If I've been driving for this thing so long and then I change my mind, I'm failing. It's like, no, well, if you're enjoying your life still, I don't see where the failure is, So anyway, that was my little piece.
Yeah, it's okay to change, and it's good to check in every once in a while. Well,
yeah.
Alece, do you want to give us one little thought on what you've created, or does it speak for itself?
Yeah, there's a lot here. Yeah, I just tried to grab the big themes from everybody. So
It's good. Nice. Really
This is pretty great.
Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today and sharing your journey and your wisdom and experience, and Alece for sharing your artistic talents. The students didn't realize they didn't need to take notes because you brought the brilliant, beautiful notes. And I think that's it. Rachel, I'm going to turn it over to you.
That was so amazing. Thank you guys. Alece, that's beautiful. No, this is my favorite panel every year, because I think there's so many jobs. There's so many jobs you don't know about it, and that's like the best part, right? You can make a living doing what you love. I mean, to Pouya's point, I minored in Russian literature. It's a bizarre thing to minor in. I like reading long books. It's real weird. But you know what? It worked out, because when I work with writers, I'm like, a script is fine. I've read 1,000 pages of Dostoevsky in one night. It's fine. So a huge thank you. Students, stay on for 1 second. It's lovely seeing everyone's faces. Zoe Bell, I saw the video and I love it. So I'm excited for our students to watch it. We're going to play it after you guys leave. So thank you. Pouya, Liz, Zoe, Herb, Alece, you're amazing. Simon, I'll see you 1 second when you walk out of the room. Bye, guys. Thank you. Molly, do you want to cue up that video?
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Molly's going to play the video.
Okay, give me 2 seconds to share my screen. Can you guys see it?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Oh, I'm so bored. I just want to play with my friends. Wait a minute. I can't play with my friends. The heck, Sozo? I hate being tickled. I'm okay. Ow. I love this game. Who wants to play next week? Guys.
That was so badass. That was so badass.
But here's the thing, that was done in a week in COVID, right? Like for fun. Like
about next week. So
we can stop that, Molly. I don't know what's happening. So like creativity knows no bounds, right? Like I don't care if you're stuck in COVID or in your room or they only did that in 1 week. You guys have had 3 weeks.